Here we go, stacks man, the numbers, and I just wanted to do a quick update here. I wanted to look at just two tech stocks real quick that, in my opinion, I mean, I know everyone's doing, again, these Trump videos, 5 stocks to buy under Trump and all this, blah, blah, blah. But in general, these are two companies essentially based out of America. These are American tech companies, and they're kind of, the behind, I don't want to say behind the scenes players, but they're the backup players, right? And I'm going to be talking about SMCI and, of course, AMD real quick. And I know people are going to say, well, if we like tech, you can just buy Nvidia. Totally understandable. And if you feel comfortable buying Nvidia at these high levels, in my opinion, it's entirely your own prerogative. It's your money. You can go for it. I feel that, again, these kind of like back end players may not potentially be the leaders in the space, but I just feel like they have more room to run, more room to grow over time. And, shout out to a couple of people in the Discord that, like Nvidia, and they always try to talk about their competitive advantage, the demand, the AI market, and all of it. And I completely understand it. And that's why I think that something like AMD, the backup player, as we said, in my opinion, could potentially just have more growth potential over these next couple of years than something like Nvidia. But let's get into it. First of all, SMCI, in my opinion, I really like this stock in the numbers over the long term, but that's just me. Some people didn't agree with me that I was still bullish as we really chunked down here below support levels, and the stock obviously climbed back up nicely, touching 39.23 yesterday, and now today pulling back and closing at 34.43, down about 4 points, roughly 10.33% pullback after running right up to this trend line, as you see right here. This is why I love trend lines, man. I draw them out, and there you go. A lot of people poking fun. Oh, you got enough lines, you should draw more lines. Hey, listen, I drew out the lines, and it worked out perfectly well. And that's why I even said, in my opinion, you can see this run up to what the moving average we were looking at of like right around here, 38 2/3. And I even said we can get to the trend line here, maybe 39.20. Stock hits 39.23 and pulls right back off the trend line. So, in my opinion, I love my trend lines. And now you can see a pullback potentially to about 32.90, 33, and then you may see a bounce back to 36. So only time will tell. Technically, they're not out of the woods yet. They submitted the plan to the NASDAQ. They got the extension. We're all kind of waiting and seeing. But on the news that they submitted the plan, of course, we got a nice little bullish run-up. More than doubling the stock. It hit lows of 17.25 and then almost ran straight back up to 40. So anyone who stepped in, bought that dip, averaged down, congratulations. You're probably still up pretty nicely. But SMCI long term, in my opinion, I think is growing very well. If this short seller report didn't come out, this stock probably would have been 150, 160 a share, hitting new highs with the rest of tech and the rest of the market. Again, this was a company that was doing a lot of business with Nvidia. This was a company that saw the revenue go from 3 to 4 to 7 to 15 to 29 billion guiding. So that's why we saw that they were about to become a big player in the space. And then, of course, we got the bad news. And people still want to cite years ago, they got delisted off the NASDAQ, they did some shady stuff, and yet somehow the company was still able to remain intact, conduct business, got delisted off the NASDAQ, got back on the NASDAQ, and climbed the whole time throughout all the years, which is why I'm saying, even if they got delisted off the NASDAQ, if the company's still able to operate their business as expected, and they bring in that forecasted revenue growth that they were laying out over the next 2-3 years, then honestly, in my opinion, it's not going to matter whether they're on the NASDAQ, whether they're on the frickin' London Stock Exchange, OTC, probably shouldn't matter too much, in my opinion. That's why, again, Nvidia, what, $3.5 trillion market cap? Some say they deserve it, some say they don't. SMCI seeing a big jump in revenue, market cap back down to a $20 billion valuation. Do what you will with that information, entirely your own prerogative. RSI, we can see, ran up right to about 60 and then had the pullback today, sitting here at 53.6. And of course, our moving average now down to slightly below $38 at 37.84. And we can see that we ran up basically right to that top Bollinger Band we met up with on the daily. We got kind of right above that moving average. We got right to that trend line that we looked at, and we slightly rejected. And then the next day, boom, we had the pullback. So in my opinion, I kind of saw it coming, but off of the surge and this U-turn, this nice V recovery, you can see that the MACD crossed to the upside, which is why I'm saying, we could calm down today, maybe even tomorrow a little bit, but then we should technically continue back up. And that's why I'm looking maybe back to like this 45.50 level. Really shouldn't be an issue in my opinion, but we'll see. We'll see, because I'm sure people still remember all of the negative headlines that came out on SMCI. So the fact that they saw it drop down and gap down to about right where it is, drop over 50%, and then rebound over 100%, they may be hitting the short button again on this recent rebound surge, right? So that's why we could maybe kind of hang out for a couple of days. We'll see. Switch over on the weekly real quick. We can see RSI completely came down right to that benchmark, and now boom, had a little bit of a pop, sitting at 41 1/3. And again, you can see that we may bounce around here in the mid 30, low 30 range here as I laid out. But in my opinion, again, you can see mid Bollinger Band on the weekly, about 46 1/4. In my opinion, that should be the next stop for the stock. Crossed on the MACD, first quarter kind of, slid down, and now you can see the flattening and the potential curling. So that's why over the next couple of weeks, not only do I expect 46, I think 50 and 60 plus is very, very feasible in my opinion. But again, over the longer term, if we again come out of this hopefully mostly unscathed, if we hypothetically maintain NASDAQ listing while maybe paying out a fine for whatever, doing business with his brother-in-law, whatever the issue was again, then if it's back to business as usual, that's why I'm saying, if you look at it, if this company can get back to excuse me, if this company can get back to $150, $180, $200 a share. Obviously, do the math. You're talking, 600-700% returns over the next several years, potentially. There are some people saying, oh, it should get back to 100, no problem, like this time next year. So that's why, on a percentage point basis, in my opinion, I think you have more growth with the secondary, third, the secondary and third players in the space, as opposed to just buying Nvidia, because it is up pretty big in my opinion. It is up pretty big. Also AMD, again, people saying if anyone's going to compete with Nvidia, it's going to be AMD, and we saw that again over many years, going up to essentially this AI boom. So chances are, again, they may need a little bit more time. However, in my opinion, because they're more of a backup player in the space, I still say American tech. I'm personally looking for, as I mentioned, SMCI I think is personally good. I like AMD here at these levels. I think it's not bad. We could potentially sell off and come down into like the mid 120s. So you can see another 10-point shave maybe if you want to wait for the perfect fill maybe. But in my opinion, I think AMD has more upside than Nvidia from these current levels. Also, again, American tech, I like companies like IBM. I mentioned that before. I said, in my opinion, stock should get back to 200, no problem. Ran up to 230, 240, wherever the heck it went. But again, in my opinion, I think the reinvestment back into American technology and having our domestic technology production and supply is going to be key, which is why I like almost every company in the sector across the board, even Intel, believe it or not, in my opinion. I broke down Intel in the numbers. I think there could still be value there. All of our company, Western Digital, Qualcomm, essentially any company you name, for the most part, I would say, probably has more upside than Nvidia, believe it or not. And I know, of course, if Trump comes out and he says, oh, we love technology and, we're going to lead AI, for the next 20 years or whatever. Obviously, we know Nvidia is probably going to see a bump off a positive statement like that. But again, I'm pretty sure you guys can appreciate what I'm saying about kind of investing into the smaller, kind of like behind the scenes contributors, as opposed to just investing into the front man. Right? But again, maybe that's just me. Some people might hear what I said and say, listen, yeah, kind of makes logical sense, but Nvidia's a beast, so I'm just going to buy Nvidia. So again, that's understandable. That is completely understandable. But yeah, this is the, as you see, this is the support level going back from the lows in beginning of April 2018, touching to those lows there, October 22, right there, January 10, 23. So that's why, again, I have this trend line drawn out. You can see technically we're kind of in like this upward channel, and we just hit the 20-day moving average on the 1 year. There's the 1 year, and it technically rejected and came back down. So upward channel, we may actually see a break down to the very low 130, sub 130, maybe back to this support level of about 127. But then after that, again, technically, we're in kind of like this downward. Well, hypothetically, let's say if this breaks, right, it would be like that, hypothetically. So you can see, technically, it's like a symmetrical triangle, but because it's an American tech company, right, that could be a big part of the AI space. That's why, again, in my opinion, stock was up here above 200. We're down 100 points less. That's why I'm saying, even if it does break down to the support and we get near the apex of the triangle, it should hopefully, technically, break to the upside as opposed to the downside, in my opinion. But we do have earnings estimated for around the very beginning of February, so we'll be potentially approaching that apex if we stay in this triangle, and then we'll see if we break up or we break down. But 137.72, down almost 3.5 points, 2.4% on the day. Market cap 223.5 billion. PE, when you look at it, could be viewed as overextended. Obviously, it's almost 124 times earnings. EPS has been on the up and up, and you can see when they miss, they're essentially reporting just about in line. Estimates 77 a share, they post 77. Estimates 92 cents a share, they post 92 cents a share. So it's amazing, right? How I always say, when you look at something like Nvidia and you look at their earnings estimates, somehow they're always able to blow it out of the water, 10, 15, 20% above expectations. You look at all these other tech companies, right? It's like, oh, they nailed the estimate. It's like just in line with what the company report. Just makes me laugh, man. It really does. But we can see next quarter, going into February, we're expecting even more profitability, and we're looking for $1.09 a share, and that's going to be on revenue of $7.54 billion. And we can see again, just over the last couple of years, the profits did take a big hit and pull back to 5-4%. But you can see the revenue just over the last 5 years or so has went from sub 7 billion a quarter. Now we're doing over 7.5 billion, sub 7 billion for the year. Now we're doing over 7.5 billion for a quarter. And you can see that 22, 23 had a slight dip in revenue. But again, in my opinion, I do think we're going to be on the up and up throughout 2025 and 2026. And we can see that revenue sitting here at 22, 23 billion in change. So we're technically trading about 10 times annual revenue. But over the last couple of quarters, you can see Q1 saw a dip, and we've technically been on the up and up for the last 2 quarters technically after Q1, and the net margin percentage climbing from 2.25% up to over 11% for last quarter. So we're bringing back the profitability, and yeah, in my opinion, again, I do like these other tech players as opposed to just buying Nvidia, in my opinion. If we look over here, debt was 3 billion, comes down to 2.25, basically flat at 2.25. Free cash flow, almost $500 million this time last year, sub 300 million, so that's up 60%, 66%. Cash, again, technically bouncing around, not the highest it's been, but cash sitting here at 3.77 billion right now. That's what I mean. We have good cash on hand. We're generating decent revenue. We're maintaining. We are profitable. Our debt has come down. Free cash flow up. Assets outweighing liabilities in both the short and the long term. And if we look here, we have cash 3.7, debt. So if we subtract debt from cash, we're still at about positive 1.5 billion. If we look at our balance sheet, we can see assets maintaining and recently jumped up to almost 70 billion. Liabilities We're pulling back to 11.3 and now jump back up kind of almost to where they were, still lower than where they were here about a year and a half, 2 years ago, while we saw a bump of about 2 billion in change in assets. So we are technically seeing growth in assets outweighing growth in liabilities, and we can see the equity slowly inching up now from sub 55. Now we're up to almost 57 billion. Book value per share up from sub 34. Now we're above 35. So we're only trading, what, 4? We're trading about 4 times book value, which, again, really isn't too crazy for the type of company in the type of market that we're looking at here, in my opinion. PE, as we see, was technically up here 400, 800, so even here at 100. This is, again, what I say, right? Sometimes we need to let the fundamentals adjust and quote-unquote come back down to reality. And, something like AMD, you may see it kind of just slowly continue to drop down. It may not make sense. All of a sudden, the PE is like 110, and then it's like 98. And then, it'll get to like, who knows, like, 85 or something. And then that's when it bottoms out and it pops and it starts raging, right? Because it came back down to earth and now, boom, we're on the up and up. So that's why, again, on calls, I personally may be a little early here, even though for some reason I bought one today. But, full disclosure, but for shares, in my opinion, I think not a bad price to start adding. And again, if you see a $10, $15 drop, if you liked it at 130 and change, you should love it at, 120, sub 120. Price to book, 4 times book. You can see we ran up to above 5. We're slowly pulling back to earth. Enterprise value, basically in line with where the company is valued at. Return percentages are up after going from positive to negative. They've all rebounded nicely. Gross margin percentage was low 30%. Now we're sitting here at almost 45% as of last quarter. Operating margin was negative, single digits, almost back flat, up above 10%. EBITDA down to 16, sub 16, now up to almost 22%. Net margin percentage, again, we saw the rebound. We went negative, came back flat, slightly positive, and now boom, we're up to above 11%. So phenomenal rebound quarter as of late for AMD, which is why I'm saying the surge may continue upward and onward for AMD. And again, I know they're not Nvidia, and I'm not saying they may become a $3 trillion company, but again, sometimes it pays to buy. This isn't necessarily an under the radar stock, but sometimes it pays sometimes to buy the second, third, fifth company in line when looking at the industry. So definitely something to keep in mind here, in my opinion. But yeah, 50-50 on the EPS, 3 out of 4 beats on the revenue. Revenue, again, even though they jumped up these estimates from 9 to 16 to 23 billion, AMD still beating on these annual revenue estimates. And again, basically in line. When they miss EPS, they're essentially in line. So that's why I don't really see big negatives for AMD. I know people cite, again, you can see something like the gaming segment dropped in revenue from 22 to 23. But I still say the growth is there. Big jump up in revenue out of Japan. Slight pullback in China. But again, I feel like we're going to redirect this revenue over the next couple of years. Tick up in Europe. So that's why, again, I kind of made my case for both AMD and SMCI. But again, this is just my opinion. And you guys, as I always say, you have carte blanche in the comments section. So if you think I'm crazy and you think everyone should just buy Nvidia, that's okay. You can say that. If you think you kind of understand my logic and you may want to buy, like an AMD or an IBM or something instead of Nvidia, awesome. Let us know that as well. Again, everyone thinks differently. The MACD, we can see actually kind of just crossed to the upside, and then we had the pullback here off of the 20-day moving average. So this is why now, we went up and then we came down, but we're kind of in this upward channel, so we might be due for a pop-up again, right? So we might come right back up and retest this mid-Bollinger Band of about 140, 172. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But it technically didn't cross back to the downside. So that's why we may continue on the up and up here with that recent MACD cross. We could probably, yeah, get back to the top Bollinger Band, as you see, about 150. 50-day moving average 153. You can see that would technically keep us still inside of this triangle. So very, very possible. RSI 40, right? Again, this is not necessarily, again, I'm not saying it's the forgotten about player in the space. It's just, you know, the second, third player in the space. So it gets a little less attention. But of course, as, you know, hopefully headlines come out, you know, they release this, they're coming out with this, they showcase this, it's going to rival Nvidia's this product and this line, then of course we know that all the money is going to flow into AMD, which is why I'm saying the fact that it's kind of been like bleh, coming down big off the highs, everyone's focusing more on Nvidia, everyone's talking about the SMCI news, right? So maybe, in my opinion, maybe it's time now to position yourself into AMD, and no one's really looking at it. RSI sitting here again at 40. Let's look at the weekly. I'll let you go. Weekly RSI, a little over 43. We can see we ran up. We have this downward channel, and now we may be getting ready to pop, take that next leg higher. 50-day moving average on the weekly, just a touch below 160. So again, you could see the argument, mid-Bollinger Band, 148, almost 148.5. So this is why you could see the argument to get back to around that 150 level and even the 160 level. That'll be that 50-day moving average. That'll be basically right near the top of this triangle. But of course, if we break down, as we said, support trend line, bottom triangle about 128, instant support trend line about 127 and change. Bottom Bollinger Band here on the weekly, sub 126. So, of course, could go either way. MACD recently crossed to the downside after crossing to the upside here as of late, but we know we may stay into this downward channel and then boom. So, only time will tell, but again, in my opinion, over the long term, I personally like SMCI, AMD. I think I also like IBM. I might like most of them across the board if they're if the bulk of the business is American-based technology. Because if that's where the reinvestments are going to be, and again, even if we hear AMD spending money, oh, we're building a facility somewhere in whatever, Wisconsin or something, right? We know that when we hear that announcement, chances are we're probably going to see a bump up in the stock. So keep that in mind as well moving forward. But that's pretty much it. I'll end it there. So once again, this is Stocks by the Numbers. I want to thank you for stopping by. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please drop it down in the comment section. I'm usually pretty quick to reply. Thumbs up algorithm helps me get more eyes on the channel. And of course, subscribe to the channel. That is our handshake agreement. That is how you help me help you. But more importantly, moving forward, like I always say, I understand that markets are rocky, they're volatile, and they are very uncertain. So I want to wish all of you success. I hope everyone makes a couple of dollars. Thank you for your time. Have a good day.